Middle East peace talks have begun for the 873rd time in a row. Today, Israeli and Palestinian leaders met face-to-face for the first time in nearly 2 years. As Bush would say, we're making progress. And already they've set a date for the next negotiations. That's September 14th and 15th. In direct talks brokered by the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, both leaders also agreed to start on a framework for peace and agreed on a one-year timeline. We're making progress. But ultimately, Clinton said that peace will have to be up to the people.
Your leaders may be sitting at the negotiating table, but you are the ones who will ultimately decide the future. You hold the future of your families, your communities, your people, this region in your hands.
Of course, the conversations were complicated by tensions flaring in the West Bank after the recent killing of Israelis and uncertainty over the future of Israeli settlements. Now, I'm happy we're finally getting this ball rolling in direct talks, but I'm curious why it's taking so long when we already know what the final answer is. You think we don't? We do. I'm going to tell you. Look, everyone knows that in the end there will be three main elements of this peace deal, if it ever happens. Israel will have to go back to the 1967 borders, roughly. They'll get some of the settlement land in the West Bank, but they'll give some of the land to Palestinians for passage from West Bank to the Gaza Strip. Palestinians will not be able to get right of return, with some small exceptions. And they'll split Jerusalem. Voila! And we're done. It's that simple. Mark my words, when they get a peace deal, if they ever do, that'll be the outline. We already know it. I don't know why they haven't done it yet. Bring in Jeremy Ben-Ami. He's the president of J Street. It's a Jewish organization which advocates a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let me start by asking you this. We had Netanyahu basically saying, hey, you know what? It takes a hawk to bring us lasting peace. Now, that's an interesting statement because the other side's hawks are not represented in this equation. Does that mean that Netanyahu thinks that the Hamas should be brought in?
Well, I think for the Israeli side, the number one issue is security. And the Israeli people will go along with a deal if they feel that there actually is real security being promised and that the government feels that it can be provided. And the only side they're going to believe is the more hawkish side. When the doves or the more liberal folks have tried to bring peace plans before, the Israeli people haven't felt quite as confident as they would if Bibi Netanyahu tells them it's okay, there's going to be security.
Now, you're for, I know you're for peace, your organization is, so, but you're buying into that argument. You think Netanyahu might be able to pull this off, but of course the second element of that is, does he really want to, and are you convinced of that side?
Well, that's the big question. I think that's the variable that we will find out. I think we're going to have a very good indication within the next month based on whether or not the Israelis do, in fact, extend the partial settlement freeze that they have. I think that the key fact is if you have the political will, you can get this done. And our question for all of us who want to see this happen is, does the Prime Minister of Israel have that political will? And we will find that out.
And look, Savannah pointed out Hamas is not at these negotiations, and then we don't know if the Palestinians' representatives have the authority to be able to pull it off, especially in the Gaza Strip where Hamas controls. If Netanyahu is right, I'm going to go back to that question, and you need hawks at the table, should we have Hamas at the table?
Well, I think that the correct presumption of the American government is that you can't have at the table formally a party that has not renounced terror and violence. And so the exclusion of Hamas until they renounce terror and violence and accept the existence of a state of Israel is the correct line for the American government. But somebody somewhere has to play the role of trying to help the Palestinians to reconcile. And the Egyptians have played that role. At times the Turks have played that role. There are other third parties and mediators that need to work to try to help bring about some form of Palestinian reconciliation. But until they accept the basic frameworks of the negotiations and the existence of the State of Israel, they don't have a place in that internationally sanctioned place of negotiation.
I think you got to make peace with your enemies, not your friends. But you know, that's why I think you're right, that you got to somehow find a way to bring them in. Otherwise, everybody's not signing off on it. But let me play you a clip by Mahmoud Abbas, who's of course the other side here and the representative of the Palestinians at these negotiations. And I want to get your reaction.
We call on the Israeli government to move forward with its commitment to end all settlement activities and completely lift the embargo over the Gaza Strip and end all form of incitement.
Let me get your reaction to that. Is he right?
Well, absolutely. The Americans put a great deal of pressure on President Abbas about 3 or 4 weeks ago to join these talks. And they said this is the last chance that we're going to have to achieve this two-state solution, and you need to come to the table. Well, similarly, the time has come to say to the Israeli government and to this prime minister, if you really are serious, then do us a favor, suspend the building for the next few months. Let's get this deal done. As you've said, we know the outlines of the solution. It's not going to take us that long. Put the building on hold. As soon as you have a border that's agreed on, you can build wherever you like. But without some gesture like that from the Israeli government, these talks aren't going anywhere, and there's no indication that the Israelis are serious. So I think the time has come to be, you've got to put pressure on both sides, and that's the role of the U.S., and that's the big difference in this process versus prior ones. The U.S. president is engaged. He's engaged actively and forcefully, and he's engaged early in his administration.
Jeremy, we've gotten to the heart of the issue here, because I think we're all agreed that the rough outlines are as I explained them in the beginning, right? And that involves sacrifice for everybody. It involves the Palestinians saying no right of return, okay, except for a few people. Obviously, if they have right of return, then Israel probably ceases to exist, because there would be more Palestinians than Israelis. So that doesn't make sense. So they've got to sign on to that, etc. But are we going to find out here whether Netanyahu is serious about this and whether we can get this done based on what happens next? If he says we're continuing the settlements, it's basically him saying, well, no, we're not interested in this peace process. Do I have that right?
I think it is right. I think that this is the critical political signal that will tell us whether or not the political will is there on the part of this prime minister. If it is, this could be historic. If it is, I do buy the fact that he is the type of man like Nixon to China, like Gorbachev ending the Soviet Union domination over the Eastern European countries and the rest of the Soviet bloc. This is the type of leader who can make that deal, but the critical moment and that critical indication is going to come in the next month.
All right, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. A really interesting conversation.
Thank you.